I just can't figure out if it's because you're advanced or because I'm stunted.
You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland.
I am McLovin.
You do not talk about Fight Club.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Hello and welcome to Glacé Film Club. We're back. We've been gone for a while and I am very sorry for that, but we've got a lot of good stuff lined up for you in the next few months. And a very new guest is here with me today. He's never been on the podcast before. Callum, thank you for coming.
Hello.
Are you excited to talk about some films?
Extremely.
And what film are we on today?
The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
So when I spoke to Callum about doing this podcast, we had a chat about films to do. I thought we might be doing something a bit straight down the middle, but we've been thrown off piste a little bit. You know, we like to mess around, look through all different types of films, but this is the latest film by the Cohen brothers. You know, big directors, done a lot of films in the time. This one's on Netflix exclusive, and as you'll find out, typical Cohen brothers style, quite dark. You know, a little bit of dark humour in there, but we'll get into that. We both watched it during the week, so it's fresh in the memory. Got a lot to discuss. But this time, as I realise, and as people who've listened to the podcast before will know, they have banged on too long in the past. So, in an aim to make the format slightly slicker and not as long, we're going to limit ourselves to 30 minutes today because we can talk, and if we don't have a timer, we'll be here for maybe an hour and a half, and we'll give you a podcast the same length as the film. So it might defeat the point of the review. So we have a literal clock, a physical clock on a digital device.
An iPhone.
And I'm going to do that. So we're going to cover so many things to do with the film, give it a good review, and hopefully you'll come away from it thinking, I want to see that and see whether those guys were right or not. So if you do want to watch the film before you listen to this review, because there will be spoilers, just make that alert straight away. It's on Netflix, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Check it out and then get back on and listen to this. Okay, let's kick off. Callum, give us, before I start, got to get the clock going. I don't want to forget the new format bit.
Blimey.
Okay, 30 minutes on the clock. We'll have to stop at that. I'm going to keep an eye on it. Callum, tell me The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. What's the plot? What's the concept? Go.
The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, it's very much like the Coen brothers' back catalogue. It's a pastiche of it all, of sort of their back catalogue, really. It's got a bit of No Country for Old Men in there.
Yep.
It's got a bit of even a bit of Fargo in there in terms of its cinematography. Although the thing that I loved about the film the most was the fact that it sort of broke down that romanticised West narrative that seems to dominate a lot of narratives about what America was like in the mid to late 19th century. It breaks it down a lot.
Just as a quick kind of, if we look for the difference between this and other films, is this is done almost like a book, so it's kind of got this format where it's like there's little short stories, vignettes, if we want to use a nice technical term there.
Indeed.
All of which are set in a kind of Western environment, but different characters.
Yeah, so the film opens with a picture book, and it takes you through all these different stories. It's almost like the film acts as a book, really. It's a series of short stories within one narrative. Although classic Coen brothers, they play around with convention, they play around with what constitutes a narrative, and I think that is what underpins the scope and the development of the film as it goes on. Starts off with Buster Scruggs. He's an outlaw, and he's going through a sort of classic American landscape in the deep south somewhere, and he's playing some music, and they play around with camera angles there, and he's this amazing gunslinger. Then it moves quickly on to a bank robber played by James Franco, and talks about his experience in the West. It takes a lot of experiences and connects them in this sort of narrative, if that makes sense.
And I think that's the kind of key. It's like a lot of short stories connected kind of along this weird timeline that gets played about. So that's the kind of overview of it, with a lot of Coen brothers' weird dark magic thrown into it. So if we ever think about the plot, what do we think of this setting then? Because you said it's a bit different. It's classically a long film. It runs at about 2 hours 14.
It is. Yeah.
For you, does it work that? And what do you think the kind of point of them doing this kind of like short story vignette setup is?
The thing is, the first hour I was hooked, and then it got to about an hour and 10 minutes, and I was thinking, blimey, is this sort of convention, is it going to last for 2 hours?
The start of it kind of feels like it is going to be quite linear, because the character of Buster Scruggs starts, and then he has a shootout with James Franco's character, gets killed, and then it carries on from there.
I don't think it's not James Franco. Is it James Franco's character?
I thought it was.
I don't think so. I don't know.
Right,
No.
we'll review that one.
Okay, fair enough.
Point of order there. If it isn't, then I will amend this bit of conversation. Okay, well, forget what I was going to say on that point then. Carry on.
Okay. It kind of talks, like I said, I didn't think it was going to stand the 2 hours, because I think to stretch a convention out like that over 2 hours, it can become a bit slightly laboured, perhaps. But then once the hour's in, it goes from a story of a prospector, to a story of the homesteaders moving from east to west. They're trying to get to Oregon on the Oregon Trail, and the film for me just picks back up then. There is encounters with Indians, there's sort of questions of morality, questions of sort of, people are living hand-to-mouth existences on the frontier, and it's humorous, and it breaks down that romanticised West, but then, again, I don't know really, I'm searching for the word.
Well, picking up on that, because one thing I really struggled with the film is, I get what it was doing, right? Yeah, they're not going to give you a conventional film with a conventional narrative, but they didn't directly link all of these. There were a mix of short stories, but I found it very hard then to feel like attached to it. One story starts and comes to a conclusion relatively quickly.
Yeah.
But so for me, this was a big down point of the film. Is I knew that it was that format. I think it's a good format, but it just didn't hook me in. I didn't feel as connected with the stories of the characters. But when we were chatting about this earlier, you were saying how you thought it kind of helps and delivered this point of showing all the different elements of frontier life and kind of unromanticizing them.
Well, definitely. I think the point of the film is to show many aspects of society. The classic narrative of the frontier story is you've got cowboys, you've got Indians, you've got these, mountain men, and it's the sense of adventure. But I think what this film does quite nicely is that it completely eradicates that narrative. Whilst those characters are still in the film, it emphasises the diversity of the frontier in many ways, and it emphasises the sort of the brutality of it in a way. And I kind of like the fact that you're invested in one character and then they just snatch it away from you like a bag of crisps. They're like, no, you can't finish them. We're on a new story now. And I think that mirrors the brutality of what the frontier might have been about. It's like you get to know one person or one group of people, and then they're gone. You don't know where they've gone at all.
That makes sense to me. Yeah. I get that, and I do agree that worked nicely for doing that. And if the point of the film and the kind of message they're trying to portray is, all right, this is what a typical Western's like, it's quite romanticised, this is what frontier lifestyle was like, let's actually take a step back and go, no, it wasn't. There's all these small stories of kind of disconnect to that kind of world and these kind of lonely characters, and you don't necessarily feel their stories follow through to the American dream as they do in many conclusions, or this kind of idea of, they started at nothing, they got this land, and this is they conquered it. So the idea of chopping these narratives short works in that point, exactly saying, well, these narratives don't run the conclusion that you think they do. So yes, I get that. I agree, it works, but it's not necessarily something you're thinking as you're watching the film. And I get that. I love having to think about a film afterwards, hence why we do a podcast reviewing them. But it just didn't quite give me enough extra, like, cinema relief in a way to kind of keep me wanting to see another one. But maybe that is just taste. But I want a bit more of that. I kind of want a slight bit more kind of action, intrigue, bit more character development. I feel like it just kind of gets a bit monotonous after a bit. But good. I agree. Good in that sense. What short story would you say kind of works best for that?
I think the Homesteader story I think's great because you've got this huge.
Which one's that?
It's the one when they're on the Oregon Trail.
Okay, yeah.
And there's a wagon train of people trying to set out and sort of fulfill their manifest destiny and sort of fulfill their dreams of discovering something new. And yet, it's the whole story is centered around 4 characters. It's centered around the 2 trailblazers, the lady, I can't remember the actor's name now, and her dog, and the dog runs off. It nearly gets killed. The lady ends up dying. She shoots herself in the head when they're being attacked by Indians. The other guy wants to marry her, but then we never know what his reaction is to her death. Yeah. He ends up trying to fight Indians and nearly gets scalped. I think that emphasizes the brutality of the character development. It attracts you to one character. You get involved with a character. You kind of want them to survive. You kind of want them to make it. And then in classic Coen Brothers style, bleakness and darkness, they take it away from you.
For me, that one had everything I would want out of them all. And I understand you can't have the same format in each of them. So maybe this is me just winching off saying that I want a bit of closure from it because it kind of had that at the end of it. Because that one in itself was more of a complete story, I feel. It had the start where there was the kind of mystery of where they're going to go into this big adventure. It's like, oh, what's going to happen? Then you have the journey itself. Then there's a bit of, some problems along the way. Like you say, her brother dies, and then the dog, they go and try to kill the dog, and then there's the proposal. So it's got everything. And then the Indians, you've got the action. So it covers the aspects of the frontier life in a bit of a grittier way.
Although I do think it's quite nuanced in a way. The fact that you don't get any sense of closure, because the idea of the frontier, I mean, obviously it was in the late 19th century. A lot of historians were saying the frontier is now closed. However, I think one thing that the Coen brothers has managed to do in a nuanced way is through the characters is that we'll know the idea of the frontier isn't closed. The idea of this sense of we need to expand our borders, we need to expand our sort of idea of what we think we are. The fact that it gets rid of the fact that there is no closure, I think, is a mirror of the development of an American sort of consciousness, I think.
Okay, so what do you think their point is in this then? Like releasing it today and making this kind of different Western like story.
I think there's a lot of attention is being given to history at the moment, particularly in political discourse, referring back to history.
And the use of history.
Yeah, definitely. And it's always a romanticised version of what people think the past was like anyway. Yeah. However, I don't necessarily think that the main purpose of the film is politically motivated. However, it does when I was watching it, I was kind of thinking, well, actually, it's breaking down that mythologized past that a lot of American education, American
and is built
politics
on like
is
the
built
idea
on,
of America
definitely.
as a concept.
Yeah, definitely.
Built on their ability to conquer and expand and kind of establish a new civilization from the start. But this kind of says, well, no, there's these kind of issues on the way, and it's not as straightforward as you think.
It's not as clear cut, and the characters are depicted as greedy white people.
Yeah, not heroes.
Exactly.
Which is in kind of American mythology, if you can call it that, to an extent.
Indeed, yeah. And I think the nuance in it, in that respect, is breaking down that mythology, I think. Also, it's the sort of uncertainty of the future, in a way. A lot of the people in the film are living hand-to-mouth existences. They don't really know when they're going to get any money. They don't really know what lies ahead in the coming months, particularly Liam Neeson's character. Yeah. He's travelling to frontier settlements and performing to between 10 and 30 people on these little shows with a poor man that's got no arms and no legs. and then he ends up. It's alluded to the fact that he's thrown in the river,
like,
discarded.
For me, that was one of my favourite of the vignettes, but horrifically cold, isn't it?
It is.
So you mentioned that, let's have a focus on the characters now and the actors, and I think that's a good one to discuss because when I was thinking about this before, which character did I think was the most intriguing and the best performance? It was Liam Neeson's character, and in that short story, there's very little dialogue. If I recall, the performer, like you said, is a man with no arms, no legs, and he's what does he get described as, like a skilled orator.
He basically he cites monologues, doesn't he?
Yeah,
essentially.
In this kind of wagon that's turned into a little theatre, people come and he recites these monologues for a few hours, and then Liam Neeson's character goes and collects the change. But there's never any verbal interaction between Liam Neeson's character and the performer, and it's all the acting is done through either his conversation with other people or just the looks of the eye. Like this is so. Then there's especially one where he buys his new wagon and buys a performing chicken. Yes, and he's sat there by the fire like they are every night, and the chicken's there eating the feed he's laying down to him, and they're just looking at each other from across the fire. And that was, for me, was unbelievably powerful. And I think this fits into what we were speaking about just before, about these individual existences, because that was such a lonely, kind of series of events for both the characters. Liam Neeson's character, he's on his own in the sense of this is his profession, just taking this performer around, but also his carer in essence. But whereas the performer, who's disabled, he's the only person he's got in the world is Liam Neeson's character, but there's no relationship between them really, and it almost warms your heart at first. And this is where they really get you, because it warms your heart. This relationship's put forward as quite a caring one. They're both there for each other. They're both earning a living. They've both got the different skills. And then, like you said, it's alluded to at the end that he then throws him into the river and then moves on and uses the chicken.
And of course, the darkness of it all is that he's replaced an armless and a legless man with a chicken.
Yeah.
And I thought, as dark as that is, I thought it was quite funny. In some ways.
Well, that's the Cohen brothers' like dark humour coming into play there, which is, like I said before, the only Cohen brothers I've seen before this is Fargo, which for me I really like because of that real dark, twisted sense of humour in it. And that is a kind of nod to that. I don't think Buster Scruggs has as much dark comedy in it as Fargo does, but that is kind of one of those elements, but that's what makes it more shocking, because it's almost laughable in the way that it's constructed, but it's insane. And like you're saying, it's showing these kind of individual existences. But I thought was interesting is like, when you ever talk about disabled people in frontier life, or it might be like someone who's portrayed
they're not spoken about,
but might be portrayed as like a crazy person, or the only disability you might be think is if someone's lost a limb but through combat. Like, this is like a genuine, like, someone who's got a disability and put into this scenario, and then it just makes you think about, well, the only kind of narrative I am ahead of Western and frontier lifestyle is this American heroes, American families building the nation, but forgets everyone else. And then this builds into, if we're looking at it from the modern perspective, is, well, what is a modern nation? I mean, we're going to get onto something very difficult here. But it's kind of, especially now in America, where they kind of literally building walls to define who's not and who is part of it. This is like, who's part of that narrative from the start?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there is an element of that, and I think, my previous point about sort of breaking down that sort of American imaginary in a way, I think that's one thing that the Coen brothers have done quite well in this film, depicted through all these little vignettes and these stories. And I mean, what was your favourite story?
I think story-wise, like you mentioned before, where they travel into Oregon.
Right, okay.
Just because I think that was the most engaging, and it covered a lot more areas of the kind of Western. It had the action, but maybe that's because it had the elements of a stereotypical Western, but with a twist on it.
I saw so many parallels between Liam Neeson's story and the Homesteader story in terms of they're just traveling around. They have no purpose other than just to survive. And I think
without that kind of idea that they are conquering or claiming land. They are the frontier folk moving forward on the frontier, but with no real idea or purpose. And still, it is a survival thing, which not everyone's winning.
Yeah, definitely. And the characters completely embody that in many ways.
What characters stand out for you amongst any of them? I know you mentioned to me earlier about the old guy who's panning for gold. Yeah, I think that's a good one for us to mention, because I think that's quite a big one. I do like
that story in the sense that he's a prospector, isn't he? Yeah. So he's traveling around trying to find gold, and he comes across this river in this beautiful landscape that looks absolutely amazing on camera, and you kind of know, because the landscape's so beautiful, you kind of know that he's looking for something that's also beautiful, and in this case it's gold. And he does all this legwork. He sort of digs up different parts of this riverbank, searches for the gold, ends up finding a haul, only to get shot in the back by another guy, another prospector. And it's alluded to that he dies, essentially. And the reason why I like that character the most is because I felt sorry for him in many ways. He had this sort of romantic. He was a very innocent man in many ways. Yeah, because he was
quite playful, wasn't it?
He was singing to himself.
Music does play quite a big part in this film.
Definitely, yeah. And I think the music element, adds to the innocence of some of the characters in many ways. Yeah. And this prospector, he sings to himself. He's quite childlike in many ways, although at the same time he's very old. It's played by Tom Waits, the character. Which again is quite interesting anyway. Yeah. Then he gets shot in the back, and it's quite sad because he screams to the sky, almost screaming to God, saying, "You shot me in the back, you shot me in the back," almost saying how unfair and how unjust the frontier is.
But what I think, there's an extra element, because he then fights the guy, doesn't he, and shoots him.
Yes, he does. So
for me, because it's given the decision that he's dead and he's gone, right, so this is, it's the narrative there is that this guy's worked for it and just had it taken off him. That's the flow of nature. Okay, and I feel that makes a point. It could have ended there, but he fakes that he's dead at that point, fights him, shoots this other guy, ends up taking the gold. But for me, that's almost kind of saying, this is the plucky nature of this frontier life. This guy has worked really hard for something, had it taken away, but then claimed it back. I see that as more as a kind of positive. Even if he does die, forget that. Yeah. There's a kind of suggestion that, all right, there's this mentality of the never say die attitude.
I do, yeah. I get that. Although at the same time, I do think it was kind of a Pyrrhic victory in the end, because he sort of, even though he does fight back, he dies anyway. Yeah. So he'll never, the riches that he's searched for his entire life, he'll never experience because he's dead. Yeah. And I think that's quite depressing.
So it is okay. So maybe the point of that then is, he's fought back, and this is the plucky kind of mentality, but it's futile. You can be as plucky and you can fight and you can work hard for as much, but in that scenario, it's futile. It doesn't mean anything because no one's working together. They're meant to be building a nation, but it's just people working for themselves.
I agree, and I do think that's one thing that the Coen brothers have done quite well with that character, is that as an audience, I wanted him to succeed. Yeah. I wanted him to find the gold.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
And the Coen brothers wanted the audience to feel that, only for it to be snatched away. And when he fights back, the audience almost feel like, oh yeah, he's fighting back. Yeah, go on, kill the guy that's just trying to kill you. And then in classic style, it's just taken away from the audience again. It's so bleak.
Yeah.
Fucking bleak.
There's nothing redeeming in the film, is there?
No.
Right. Okay, we've got about 8 minutes left. So let's quickly mention this, and you talked about the visuals there.
Oh God, yeah!
It is stunning, the film. It is really nice, and that story, especially when it's set in the valley, the water, I feel the kind of nature element they use there is, like you said, it adds to the innocence, but there's a lot of kind of beauty to the whole film. And this ties into the plot and what we were saying about that. But for me, just from a kind of cinema perspective, I was very drawn in by a lot of the footage.
I think one thing that the frontier became, the landscape became part of the human in the film. The humans were battling the landscape as much as they were battling themselves. Yeah. And for me, that kind of, it reminded me of The Revenant in many ways.
Okay, I've not seen that, but
sort of this idea.
I've read about it now. I can see what you mean.
Battle between humans, and then this battle between nature and human. Are they distinctly separate? Well, in the Coen brothers, this film in particular, it paints it as, well, actually they're very similar, because the humans are defining the landscape and defining nature, and nature's defining the human. So yeah, the Prospector story of the film, beautiful. Although I loved the camera shot, the first camera shot in the Buster Scruggs. They put the camera behind the guitar when he's playing that song,
cool.
And you can see the sort of the mountain through the guitar strings as he's playing. And for me, it felt like the music was part of the landscape as much as the landscape was part of him. Yeah. As weird as that sounds, it was really, really interesting.
I feel that first vignette is fantastic as the kind of intro, which gets take you away quite quickly, because you start watching the film and think he's going to be the main character of it all.
Which is what I love about it, because he dies in the first 15 minutes.
But I love there, like we mentioned about music being used.
Yes.
There's very, again, quite playful, childish music in a way against this very dark backdrop as he's just going round, he's like the fastest gun in the West and all this.
Yeah.
But I think the music does do that, and it gives this, again, it has this dark comedy kind of feel to it, and which is quite strange. But there's a camera shot I like in that, when you're talking about the guitar one, but when he's on the horse and it keeps flicking up to the mountains like that and to the sides, which again emphasizes the landscape and the nature, but it's this kind of, like I said, just weird kind of quirky character put into what a traditional really thinks quite a serious setting.
What they've done is they've used the landscape to break down that myth, haven't they?
Yes.
The typical landscape, it's that classic, it's in blimmin' heck, what American state? It's the Grand Canyon, isn't it? I think, with the
Nevada. Is that?
It's the Nevada with the big mountains. It's like the classic sort of cactus image of the mountains. It's the classic image of the West, isn't it? The sort of rural,
look at this. This is what it looks like.
Rural landscape.
And you now know what you think that is, but we're going to show you that's not what you think it is.
Yeah, by putting the quirky character right in the middle of it.
Exactly.
And that's what they've done with the camera as well.
5 minutes ago, that's a good way of wrapping all that up.
Nice one.
So, tell me generally, what did you think of the film? What did you like about it? What did it lack? And we'll give a review we'll give a rating at the end, but just quick summary for you, what you thought of it.
I love the fact that it was split up into a series of vignettes. I love the fact that once you got invested in a character, they were either killed off or you didn't know what happened to them. Yeah. I love the dark humour of it all. I love the setting. I'm really, really interested in sort of the frontier and late 19th century America. And for me, I love westerns, and I love the how they broke that down. They broke down the myth. I think it could have been half an hour shorter. It was quite long. Yeah. Towards the end, with the wagon, the final story, I thought, I've had enough now. I get it. I get the point of it. But then at the same time, one thing that I did love about it is the ending. I still don't know what it means.
Yeah, but the thing is,
I can have a guess what it means. Maybe that's the point. I don't know.
After analysing all this, I used to have a lot of respect for the film, and I think there's great elements. But looking back to when I actually watched it, once it got to that last vignette, I was gone. My kind of interest in the characters had waned at that point, so I don't think it had as much impact.
I agree.
More retrospective impact.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Anyway, it could have been a bit short. Anything else that you think it lacked, and for a Coen Brothers film, is there more Coen you wanted to see in there?
No, I think there was enough sprinkles of Coen-esque There was enough, Cohen sauce in there.
Cool. For me,
tea time, isn't it?
All right, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. We could do this. For me, like I mentioned before, I thought it was good in the sense that I liked what they did with the format. I've not really seen anything done in that sense before with the vignettes, how it was kind of a bit literary. I liked some of the stories. I was gripped by a few of them, but at the same time, some, even though I get the point that they were trying to make or what they were trying to display, just didn't give me enough. I just wanted a little bit more narrative. I wanted something to grab me in. I like the dark humour, the dark comedy, not enough for my liking. I think it could have been used more. There could have been a bit more of that kind of slapping you in the face with it, and I think that would have driven the point home a bit more, and that would have given me the extra to want to watch it a bit further. So for me, yes, I like what they did, and in discussing it now, I feel like I've picked up a lot of stuff I didn't do straight away, but I wasn't driven to want to think about it afterwards, because I was just kind of like, okay, fine, I get what you've done, but it was a bit tricky to watch. Callum, we've got a minute to go. Out of 10, what would you give the Ballad of Buster Scruggs?
9 out of 10.
And you definitely recommend?
Definitely recommend for any Cohen Brothers fan. Maybe not as pretentious as this sounds, not for your average cinema.
Well, you set the stall out there now. People listen to this are going to hear you again going, I've got your number.
Who's that guy on there?
Well, I'm sorry to say, as much as I thought it was great and a better film to analyse than it was to watch. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I wouldn't stop you from watching it, but I agree with Callum by saying I feel you need to be the person who really enjoys the Coen brothers and those type of films to want to watch it. It's not, you might love it, you might not. I'd say watch it for a conversation, but if you're going to watch it for sheer pleasure, then, maybe flick over to something else. But I'm glad I watched it. I've been very grateful. It's given us this platform to discuss the American frontier and dive into some history, as we know we love.
Well, that's what you want, isn't it?
Exactly. That's all you can ever ask for. But now we're going to wrap it up. We're getting to 30 minutes. I can't believe we've actually done it.
No, neither can I, actually.
Thank you, Callum, for joining on your first Glacé Film Club podcast.
Thank you.
Enjoyed the experience?
I've loved it. And thank you again, Marcus, for the opportunity. Wonderful.
No worries.
Wonderful.
We'll have you back again. Thank you for listening. We'll be back very soon with some more Glacé Film Club action. Check out the films. If you want to write to us, you can even send us a letter if you want, but don't, because we won't get it. But comment any films you want us to watch, and we'll watch them and have a chat about it. Thank you, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.